auspicious occasion, whenever we come together in order to do good, we call that an auspicious occasion. Auspicious is that which brings blessings, brings merit, brings happiness, and goodness does that. When we come together to do something good, noble, there's joy and there's happiness. There's friendship, there's harmony. So today is an auspicious occasion because we're gathered here to do something good. Of making offerings to the bhikkhu, sharing a meal together, having taken the precepts, and now of course we have this opportunity to contemplate and share some ideas, some reflections on Dhamma. Dhamma is the teaching of the Buddha, but in a more immediate sense, it is the truth of the way of nature, the way things are. That may sound rather abstract to you, but it simply means that there is a reality. Regardless of time and place, there is reality. And when a human being understands and knows that reality, that human being is at peace with life. That human being has transcended suffering, misery. So the teaching of the Buddha is a way which encourages human beings to contemplate, to begin to question, to begin to inquire, to find out what this life is about. In Buddhism, we do not encourage blind belief. We think that that is not productive for spiritual progress. Blind belief is not part of the Buddhist way. On one occasion, the Buddha was giving a Dhamma talk to someone, and Venerable Sariputta, who was the Buddha's chief disciple later on, but at this stage, on this occasion, Venerable Sariputta was a newly ordained monk, and as yet he was not enlightened. He was just still training, newly ordained. So while the Buddha was expounding this teaching to some people, Venerable Sariputta was sitting to the side, fanning the Buddha, a show of respect, a duty of a disciple. After the teaching, after the Buddha had finished his teaching, he looked at Sariputta and said, "Sariputta, do you believe what I've just taught?" Venerable Sariputta said, with respect, "Venerable Sir, I don't know this teaching for myself as yet. I have not realized it for myself, so I cannot say that I really believe it." And the Buddha, and this is why the Buddha is such an exceptional teacher, rather than feeling that his disciple was stubborn and difficult, skeptical, rather than putting down Sariputta, greatly praised him. "Very good, Sariputta. That is very good. You should not accept something that you do not know for yourself. You should not just believe something blindly." Now this is the mark of a great teacher, the mark of a teacher of gods and men, the mark of a teacher who has nothing to fear, nothing to lose. How many religious teachers are willing to do that today? Very few, in very few religions. Most places, the prerequisite is that you must believe. If you say, "I don't believe," that's seen as a fault of yours, your shortcoming, the doings of the devil. But in Buddhism we say, good. It's not that we disbelieve, but we are honest. We're not asked to believe. We're asked to have an open mind. Don't accept mediocre explanations, mediocre dogmas and doctrines about this and about that no one really knows. Just what they believe. To believe is not to know. It's not the same thing. So in Buddhism we really praise and encourage this openness of mind. It's not that we disbelieve, but we want to find out. We want to know for ourselves. So this is the attitude that is greatly praised. The questioning, inquiring mind. The mind that is open and not closed. The mind that is innocent with inquiry. Has humility and honesty to find out. So many people are afraid of a mind like this. So many people are afraid of the unknown. And so they quickly jump back and grab onto something. Anything, as long as they can have it in black and white. Then they feel secure. Once you're told, yes, of course, when you die you will go to heaven. Of course, there is only one God. Of course, this is right, that's wrong. This is the only way. They're the wrong ways. You accept that and you feel comfortable. It's just like you're a little child again and your parents tell you, yes, of course, that's right. That's not right. So you don't have to take any responsibility. You don't have to think for yourself. But that sort of security is the security of being in a prison cell. When you're locked up in a prison, you're very safe. Nobody can get to you. But who wants to be in a prison cell? That's not a very inspiring state to work towards, is it? You're not sort of struggling to get into a prison cell, are you? Most of us are trying to avoid it at any cost. But yet this attitude of trying to find security just by believing something, some dogma, giving up one's rights of inquiry, giving up one's precious human birth, this human being who can question, who can think, who can see and know, giving that up, so just for the sake of feeling secure, is just like saying, well, I'm afraid of being in the world. I want to just be in a prison. Lock me up. Throw away the key. Now I feel safe. You know the story of Prince Siddhartha. Siddhartha is the name of the Buddha, his personal name. Siddhartha Gautama. The story is that at the time of his birth, there were some extraordinary events. Now, this is not necessarily to be taken as a historical event, but as a symbolic expression of some important principles. So the story is that at Lumpini Park, Siddhartha was born. Not in the usual way that babies are born. He was born in a rather unusual way. The story in the scriptures says that Prince Siddhartha came from his mother's side, and the child, the baby, came forth completely pure, clean. The child came forth, stood up, and immediately took 7 steps. 7 is an auspicious number. He took 7 steps to the north, and he surveyed all around, and then he made this statement. I don't remember the exact words, but it's something like this: a lion's roar. I am the greatest, the highest. In this realm of humans' endeavors, I am supreme. Now, it is hard to imagine that a baby could do such a thing. Nevertheless, for those who believe in the supernatural and the miraculous, of course one can believe that. For those who are a little skeptical, one may not believe it. That's not the point. It's not a matter of believing or not believing. It's not a question of whether it happened historically or... Personally, I don't think it happened like that historically. But this is a symbolic expression of two very important points in Buddhism. One, the birth of Siddhartha, this coming forth, and the purity, clean, radiant. This refers to the original nature of the mind. In its original nature, the mind is pure and radiant, unsullied, clean. So the birth means the original mind is pure. So we point to the original purity, not the original sin. The original purity of the human mind is very important. Otherwise you'd never be able to achieve it if its original nature was not there. The original purity of the mind before it is tarnished by defilements. So that's the birth of Siddhartha in this coming forth pure. Taking these steps, being able to stand on one's own 2 feet, is the ability of the human being. The ability to stand on your own 2 feet. You have within you the strength to walk the path. You have within you all the power, all the strength, all the grace, all that is needed in order to achieve liberation. The 7 steps refer to the 7 factors of enlightenment. The human being has the strength, the power, because of that original purity of mind, because of the accumulated paramitas, we have the strength within us to take these steps. We don't need an external support to do it for us. We can take these steps. We have the strength. This is very important because so many people believe, I can't do it. It's only through grace. You have all the grace you need. Just have to take the steps. And the words of this newborn baby, Siddhartha Gautama, I am the greatest, the supreme, the highest, the best. This is not just an arrogant statement, but rather pointing to the special nature of the human birth. In Buddhism, the human birth is a precious birth. The human birth is something which is, in a way, even better than the heavenly birth, the Deva realms. And the reason why this is written in this way is because even in those days, as is the case today, people are quite willing to somehow put themselves in the hands of gods and devas, as if the gods and devas know better, are better, have more power, are pure, and can somehow help. And yet here is Siddhartha, born as a human being, making this statement. I am the best, the highest, the supreme. And not just he, the human being. The human being. If Siddhartha was a deva and he became enlightened, it wouldn't be so meaningful to us, because we're just human beings. If Siddhartha was a god or the son of a god or a deva and he became enlightened, we may think, oh, wonderful, but we can't do it, because we're just human beings. But Siddhartha was a human being. It is never mentioned that Siddhartha was anything but a human being. But the human being is already more than enough. Enough because the human being can achieve this enlightenment. The human being is able to be enlightened. So that this is putting in perspective, in this present state, this human realm, the human being, its potential, its ability, its strength, it's all here within each of us. But now, of course, it's up to the individual. Will we take this opportunity? Will we move in that direction? Will we take those 7 steps? Will we cultivate those 7 steps? Will we move towards enlightenment and realize this potential that we have? So this is why the Buddha spent, after his enlightenment, spent 45 years of his life teaching, not forcing his teaching on anyone. Never did he force his teaching. Never did he resort to any form of oppression. He was peaceful. He taught the way to peace. He taught it in a peaceful way. His heart was freed from self and selfishness, full of compassion and love. He lived a life of compassion and love. He taught a teaching of compassion and love. So the way he taught was the way he was. The way he was in accordance with Dhamma, what he realized. And this is what we have today, the teaching of the Buddha, a path by which we can all move. We can all take steps to move in that direction. So now there are many steps on this path, and in Buddhism it's grouped in many different ways. The principles of Dhamma are grouped in many, many different ways. So you have the Eightfold Path, and then you have the 7 factors of enlightenment, you have the 10 paramittas, and on, these groupings of Dhammas. What they refer to is just groupings of various qualities, spiritual qualities, that we can develop, cultivate within ourselves in order for us to move towards in the direction of enlightenment. And the direction towards enlightenment is also the direction towards happiness. They're not two separate things. The Buddha taught the way to happiness and the way to freedom. And it's all one way, one direction. When you follow the way of freedom, you bring more happiness into your heart and into the world. So now, these various groupings of Dhamma, they're all pointing to us. Our spiritual, mental, emotional makeup and the way we live and deal with life. So you have things like the 10 paramittas. These are the 10 perfections, the 10 qualities that enable a human being to become a truly perfect human being. And these qualities are not talking about things far away, they're talking about just our own lives. Now the 10 paramittas are very good to contemplate. In Theravada Buddhism we have 10. In Mahayana Buddhism they only have 6. I don't know why. Maybe they'd lost 4 somewhere. Maybe they just thought 10 was too many to remember. Decided to cut it down and just have 6. So for once, Theravada Buddhism has more than Mahayana. But it doesn't matter. Now this is, it's not a matter of 10 or 20, it's just a grouping of Dhammas, a grouping of qualities that we're encouraged to develop in our lives. And I personally like this group of 10 because it's a lot. And 10 is a lot. And I noticed there is one common tendency amongst Buddhist people, especially amongst teachers of Buddhism and amongst students who want to know about Buddhism. There is this constant urge to simplify. How can I put Buddhism in a nutshell for you? And people want Buddhism in a nutshell. I'm busy. I haven't got much time. Just give me what is Buddhism in 2 words. We just want these very simple, very, very simple things. Like on one occasion in Thailand, where Venerable Ajahn, who's my teacher, lives, They came to the monastery there, some representatives from, I think it was either from Sweden or one of those countries in Europe. They wanted to find out about Buddhism because they wanted to teach or have it as part of the education curriculum. And so they came to Thailand. These were educators to try and find out more about Buddhism. So they came with their questions already. And they came to see Venerable Ajahn Chah, and they had 3 questions. And they wanted just very succinct, very simple. Why do you practice Buddhism? How do you practice Buddhism? And what's the result of practicing Buddhism? Now, we haven't got much time. Quickly, just give us it all in a nutshell. So Venerable Ajahn Chah just looked at them and said, well, why do you eat? How do you eat? And what happens once you've eaten? That's it, go away. So, when you want things in such a concise and very brief, we tend to want things very, very briefly, which is good. Of course, it's not much point in making it so convoluted, so complicated, so that people just can't get a grasp of it. If I tell you, the Buddhist teaching is recorded in the Tripitaka, only 40 volumes, go away and read them. Who wants to go and read 40 volumes of books to find out what the Buddha taught? Well, that's ridiculous. That would be ridiculous, to have to read 40 volumes or 45 volumes of books to find out what the Buddha taught. It doesn't sound very, sort of a very coherent teaching if it took the Buddha 45 volumes of notes to just say what he wanted to say. But obviously it didn't, because these were just recorded teachings over the years. Everything that the Buddha said to so many different people. But more often than not, one group of people only heard 1 or 2 discourses, which was enough. You don't need the whole lot, you just need a certain amount. But then to go to the other extreme and say, just give it to me in 2 words, that's too much. Because the result of that is that you get a lopsided view. So people say, what's the essence of Buddhism? And you say, non-attachment. Oh, now I understand. Equanimity, good. So you go away and you think the teaching of Buddhism is non-attachment, equanimity. So then you get things like, you go down the road and you see somebody who's fallen over and broken their leg, and you just walk by and perfectly equanimous. That's a perfectly stupid practice of Buddhism. And there are people who understand it like that. Perfect equanimity. You're sitting in your house and you see there's a fire starts in the house, you just walk outside. It's equanimous. You see, that's when you latch on to one little aspect of Buddhism. So this is why these 10 paramitas are quite good, even though it's a lot. 10 is quite a lot, but it's good because it tends to give a very balanced view of what a human being is to be developing. There's a very balanced overview of how we're supposed to be growing up, maturing emotionally, mentally, spiritually. Because these are the qualities that we encourage and practice and sustain and develop in ourselves in order to mature. Now, growing up physically, it happens quite naturally. You just eat and you grow. But emotionally and spiritually, it doesn't happen. Some of us are 40, 50 years old and we're emotionally still just like children. And spiritually, it takes a bit more than just growing old. To mature spiritually, we really have to develop intentionally certain qualities within ourselves. Otherwise, they don't mature. So these 10 paramitas are spiritual qualities that the human being can develop within oneself and within one's life. And as we develop these qualities, we become more mature. Mature human beings, mature spiritual beings. We move closer towards enlightenment, which is perfect maturity. So now these 10 paramitas, I'll go through them, not that you need to memorize them, but just in order to give you an overview of the sort of qualities we're encouraging, rather than just saying, just develop equanimity, you'll be all right. Because you won't be. Equanimity by itself is lopsided. You'll go astray, you'll make many mistakes. So, the very first paramita that we encourage everyone to develop is dana. Dana is generosity, is giving. And although this is put at the head or at the start of the 10 paramitas, which makes it sound as if it's going to be the easiest one, I must also tell you that it was the very last one that the Bodhisattva was able to perfect. He perfected all the other ones first. This was the very last one. Maybe it's the hardest one. It's both the easiest and the hardest. Because dana has many different levels. Dana is the ability to give, is the ability to share, is the ability to open our hearts a little and feel for others, care for others. It's a most beautiful quality because it begins to break the shell of the self. The shell of the self is when we live enclosed within our own worlds, me and mine, what I need and what I want. That's my world, and it's a very little world. When we start developing dana paramita, it's like we start to break through this shell and begin to see another human being, other living beings, feel their needs and reach out and care for them. This is dana. It can be done in we begin just very simple things of sharing materially, giving our time to listen, to talk to, forgiving mistakes. We give the opportunity for people to be imperfect. We give them the opportunity to try again. We forgive. Very, very important. And we care. We care enough to want to help. This is dana paramita. It's a marvelous quality, developed in small ways. You can see that it not only brings a greater sense of harmony in the world, but it brings a lot of joy to ourselves. When the heart gives, the heart is joyful. When the heart grabs and selfishly holds on, just very concerned just with me, then the heart is very miserable. This you can see for yourself, verify for yourself. Dana paramita is just a very skillful means for the human being to break out of the shell of selfishness and just develop it to whatever extent you can. It doesn't mean being foolish. It doesn't mean you have to become irresponsible. Some people hear of the Vesandara Jataka tale, which is the Jataka means the previous lives of the Buddha. And this previous life was of Prince Vesandara in India. And this is when the Bodhisattva perfected his dana paramita. And you read this is a very popular story throughout the Buddhist countries, especially in Thailand. Every year they have this big celebration on this Jataka tale, Jataka life story. And it begins at dawn and it goes right through the day. They read all these episodes, chapters, and the different monks come and read it, and they read it with these very theatrical voices. It makes it very enjoyable for the people, and people will listen to it all through the day, all the different episodes. They've even made it into a movie, which is quite funny in parts, quite entertaining. Because there are many, many episodes to this life story of Prince Vesandara. Prince Vesandara was the Bodhisattva. It's a previous life of Siddhartha Gautama. And in this story he develops dana. So he's giving away everything. First he gives away, he's a prince, so he's got all these gems and all these treasures, and he's giving away. Whatever anybody asks for, he just gives it to them. Never any question. You want to know? Yes, go ahead. So in the end they get fed up with him in the capital because he's giving away all the precious treasures of the kingdom. So they tell him to leave and so he has to go off with his wife and children into the jungles. And then some hermit comes along, and the hermit's old and he wants some attendants. And so he asks for the two children to be his attendant, and Prince Vasandhara says yes. Then somebody comes and asks for his wife. Yes, go ahead. So you read this. When I first heard this story, I thought it was crazy. If this is Buddhism, I don't know that I want to do something like that. I don't agree with it, actually. But it's not. This again is another one of those stories which is not to be taken literally. It's a symbolic thing that as one approaches towards perfection of this dana paramita, it really means the relinquishment of all attachment. It does not mean that you throw away your children or wives or husband or your house, but it's a quality of the mind that the mind can be not attached to things. It's the perfection of the relinquishment, if you wish. It's the perfection of the relinquishment, if you wish. But dana, in a more practical sense, is just learning to give, learning to share, learning to open the heart and care for another. The purity of the gift, the purity of the intention, the purity of the receiver are all very important, and you should consider carefully when you give. In particular, consider carefully why you're giving, and consider carefully what you're giving. What you're giving should be something that brings benefit. That's very important, especially giving to monks. I think lay people have a responsibility to give what is in accordance with their rules of training and what will be a help to them in their practice and their progress on the spiritual path. Don't give to them things that will lead them astray. So this is the first paramita, is the dana, giving. And we encourage this, and it's a marvelous quality that brings so much joy to everyone. It really brings a lot of joy. And the problem with quite often with society these days, in its education forms, is that it's trying to make us so independent. You look after yourself. And so you see this in Australia, for instance. Australia has emphasized so much the individual. My rights, my duties are mine, my responsibilities, my individual rights. And so it's all concerned with me, my individual rights. And so Australian people have a great difficulty in sharing and feeling part of anything. They're always isolated. They don't know how to live with people. They don't know how to relate with people anymore because they're so concerned with self. But I've seen in countries such as Thailand where people are encouraged to share, there's a much greater feeling of, say, ability to be together and share together. And therefore there's a lot more joy in life. So this is the very first of the 10 paramitas. The second one is sila. Sila is the precepts. So this is not to kill, not to steal, not to commit adultery, not to lie, not to take intoxicants. 5 precepts that you all determined this morning. Morality. It's something very noble that a human being can do. It's not a commandment. It's not like the Buddha commands you that you must not kill. You choose. Because you as a human being can. I can determine not to kill. I stop from killing. This is a quality that a human being can develop. I can stop myself from stealing. I may want something, but because I have sensitivity and wisdom, and I don't want to inflict suffering on anyone, then I stop myself. So this is sila paramita, to be developed. The next one is nekamma. Nekamma means renunciation. Now this is not something that means everybody has to become a monk or a nun. But if you want to, that's good. Renunciation simply means being aware of what we need in order to live comfortably, in order to be able to live on this planet in harmony with the planet. We know that the planet is limited, so we can't just consume and consume and consume. Desire knows no limits. The planet is limited. Something has to give. Nekamma means that beyond morality, we also consider how to best live our lives so as to make our lives as peaceful, harmonious, so that our lives become conducive for a clear mind, for a peaceful mind. Nekamma simply means simplifying our lives, avoiding that which really distracts, confuses, that which overtaxes the resources of our bodies, the resources of the planet. So let's be sensitive to how much we need and how to live in a very balanced, harmonious way, learning to simplify. Some of us exploit not only the planet, we exploit our own bodies, you see. I hear of these Chinese people from Malaysia, some of them, most of them from Thailand, who go to visit Perth. They don't go to the monastery, unfortunately. They go to the big temple. One big temple in Perth. Very big, very popular. They call it the casino. And that's where most people go to. Because a lot of the Chinese people like to, as you well know, like to gamble. So they go, they go on these tours, and it's all organized. You go there, once you say you're going to spend so much, they'll just, you're welcome. Everything is supplied for you. You don't have to do anything. You just go there, they pick you up at the airport, you just bring your wallet, that's all. And, but these people, all their mind is just obsessed with this gambling. So they go there for 4 days, they don't sleep. They hardly eat anything. Now, even though they supply these beautiful apartment-like the rooms and cuisine and everything, but these people can't be bothered. They just go there and go into the room, the international room they call it, where there's no limit as to how much you can bet. And they just stay there day and night, just sort of a wreck, physical. That's like torturing yourself, isn't it? That's exploiting your body. You're exploiting your body, you're pushing your body, no rest, no food, just for what? To indulge in this gambling, Now maybe you don't gamble, but how many of us do it with other things, you see? Or eating. Eating is very pleasurable, so we eat, and we eat, and we eat some more, and we eat some more. And it's not good for the body, you're exploiting the body. And so that's no renunciation. So renunciation is simplifying or knowing how much is necessary in order for well-being, physical bodies, the world. We can't just exploit the world. The world has limitations. We can't just pollute and corrupt this planet. We must know limitations. So that we simplify so as to bring the balance, and also not only physically, also mentally, so that the mind can become more peaceful and clear. Because if we live our lives in such a hedonistic or indulgent or confused way, of course the mind is just a wreck. The mind is so confused, and it's not really a blessing to ourselves or others. It's not a fit instrument to help bring happiness for us. So nekamma is renunciation at various levels. At the lay level, simplifying your life. Avoid exploiting yourself, exploiting the planet as much as you can. No moderation. Above that, nekamma is the third one. I've still got a lot to go. I'll go through them more quickly. Don't despair. The next one is wisdom. Wisdom means understanding. Understanding is not knowledge alone, it's understanding. Nature. Laws of nature. It's very important. Nature is all-inclusive, and it operates according to laws. Dependent on the conditions, results come about. Depending on what we do, how we live, will quite often bring about different results. So when we understand this relationship, we'll begin to see the pattern for a good life, the pattern for a peaceful life, the pattern for a happy life. And we will be able to make a positive contribution to shape this world, to shape this life for the better. The human being can contribute to life. We're not helpless victims. We can contribute to make it better. But you have to understand the consequences, the relationship. It's not in God's hands. One day at the monastery in Perth, we had some visitors. The parents were Buddhists, but the children were going to a Christian school, so they were becoming Christians. And after dana, they sat down and spoke, and it started to rain. And I said to the children, "Why do you think it's raining today?" And they said, "God made it rain." And I said, "That God, he doesn't like me, because I don't want it to rain today. I want to do some work this afternoon." And then I said to them, I don't believe that God made it rain today. And they looked very puzzled. And I said, "Why do you think it's raining today?" And I said, "Well, it's just natural. There's the wind, there's the clouds, the atmospheric pressure, the temperature. All these factors come together and they're just right so it rains. It's not a matter of God's business. He's not going to sit up there trying to decide where he's going to have it rain today. This is part of nature. Natural factors, natural conditions, natural laws. When those conditions are met, these results can happen. When those conditions are not there, these results cannot happen." And then you say, "But who makes those conditions?" That's the law of nature. It's all encompassing. It's all included. It doesn't need anything outside of it. If we understand that nature and its laws, we'll know how to live because we're part of it. And what we do contributes to it. So we can learn to contribute positively. We can learn how to live life in order to bring a healthier world into being, a healthier society, a healthier family, a healthier human being. How this can result. We can contribute, but we must understand these laws of nature. In nature, so much can happen. You see, there is nothing unnatural has ever happened. Nothing unnatural has ever happened. People say, "This is not natural." Well, it's perfectly natural. I don't see anything unnatural anywhere. And they say, "See this, that's not natural. It's plastic." Well, isn't plastic part of nature? Plastic is perfectly natural, just as natural as anything else in existence. Murder is natural. War is natural. But so is peace. Peace is natural. Compassion is natural. So in nature there's many possibilities. Everything that happens in nature is natural. But there are many, many possibilities, and we can choose. And we choose the positive, the skillful, the form of nature which is most conducive to happiness. We don't choose war, although it's natural, but we don't choose it because it's not happiness. We choose to try and create peace because that brings more happiness. Murder is natural, but we don't choose to encourage murder in our society because that's not a peaceful, happy society. We encourage respect for life. This wisdom is understanding the laws of nature, which means that we will understand how to shape life by making the right choices. Following on from wisdom, there is patience. You need a lot of patience. Patience means that life has its ups and downs, success and failure. Sometimes we've got to be able to endure. Life sometimes is hard. We've got to be able to endure. We must be patient. Patient with ourselves, patient with others. Otherwise we'll lose heart and give up. We must be able to be patient. Another part, you must rise up. Put something into life. So many people think that, you can't become enlightened through effort. So can you become enlightened without effort? In Buddhist teaching is, you don't have to do anything. That's rubbish. The energy, effort is very much part of the path, and we must bring this quality into our lives. Rise up, bring energy. Energy is that which enables us to do, enables us to walk, enables us to train. Whether it's for work, for study, for spiritual practice, meditation, you need energy. You've got to rise up, don't sink down. When you sink down, you just go to sleep. There's energy. The next one is adhitthana. Adhitthana is like resolve. Stick with it. This is a very, very weak paramita in the Australian culture. Young people just have no resolve. They think they want to do something, they start it, and then they quit. They get married, and then they quit. Very quickly. The quickest one was 2 weeks. Amazing, isn't it? This couple, a young couple, Cambodian young man and young lady, came to the monastery and wanted this blessing if they're getting married. So, yes, all right. You really want to get married, all right? I don't encourage marriage. I encourage people to ordain. But they want to get married. Yes, we give a blessing. Okay. If you're going to get married, then marry in a proper way. And one expects that people consider this seriously. That it's an important commitment. It's not just going on a holiday. It's an important commitment. So 2 weeks later, they separate. It's a very short marriage, but most of them are a bit longer than that. But there is this tendency of not being able to work through the difficulties or problems. You start studying and then you give up, and you get a job and then you quit, and you go to the monastery to become a monk, and after 4 days they run away. And that happens. This sort of inability to be resolute and commit yourself and see something through. I mean, whatever it is, it's going to have its ups and downs. So you've just got to be able to stick with something to see it through, make it work. Adhitthana, resolve, commitment, very important. The next one is satya, honesty, truthfulness, honesty. This integrity that we have with ourselves, where we don't fool ourselves, we don't lie to ourselves. We're sincere and we know our intention. It's very important. So many people just deceive themselves, find all sorts of excuses for everything. But satya means an integrity with oneself, an inner honesty. You know why you're doing it, what you're doing, with integrity and honesty. The next paramita is metta, loving kindness. Very, very important on the path. The ability to be kind to oneself, to others. The ability to be sensitive, to feel, to allow, to care, just like a mother cares for her only child. Very important. Otherwise it's unbearable. Life is unbearable. Metta. And the last paramita is upekkha. Once you've developed all these other 9, then just become equanimous. Everything will be right then. But don't just develop this last one. Upekkha means equanimity or non-attachment. It's that perfect poise of the mind that is perfectly in equilibrium, because everything else has been done. Everything else is right. We're not lazy, we're not heedless, we're not irresponsible, we're not foolish, we're not immoral, we're not selfish. All of that's been taken care of. So the mind is in perfect poise and equanimity. And this we can develop. These are the 10 spiritual qualities. There's a lot, isn't there? I don't expect you to remember all of that, but it may give you a picture. The only purpose that I mention these is to give you a kind of an overall picture of the sort of qualities we encourage in Buddhism, so that you may have a better appreciation of what a Buddhist life, or one who's living a Buddhist life, what sort of things are we being encouraged to develop. And you'll see how all-encompassing it is and how wonderful it really is when a human being moves towards these qualities and grows in these qualities. That's a beautiful human being. a beautiful human being in this world, and that human being will be a blessing to the world, not a nuisance. So I offer these reflections for you this morning as an encouragement for all of you to keep up with your good efforts, good work, and study and practice. Just take one step at a time. But don't stop. Certainly don't go back. Okay, are there any questions now? Rebirth. Well, this is a very complicated and interesting aspect of the Buddhist teaching. And certainly in Buddhism we teach rebirth. Birth is not the beginning. Death is not the end. If you can understand either one of those two, you'll be able to understand the other. And like birth is not the beginning. I can't see how we can expect that or believe that birth is the beginning, because there's such a variety of people, unless you just accept that it's all just a freak chance. But like tendencies that we have, then science can only offer that it's either genetic or environmental effects. In other words, you have your genetic inheritance from your parents that will shape you physically and mentally. And then there's environmental factors that will contribute to adapting and shaping. And you result, this human being with the tendencies and abilities. But that's really a very unsatisfactory explanation, really. Because for a start, you see brothers and sisters, and genetically they'd be not the same, it's very similar. And environmentally very similar, and they can be very different temperaments. Now the classic case of this is of Siamese twins. And these are twins that are not only born together, they're stuck together. So there was a case in Russia that they were investigating. The Siamese twins, I don't know whether one talks about two or one of them, but I mean the Siamese twins. And they were not separated at birth, and they lived and grew up to they were 40 when this article was written. Two ladies. From the waist up, or from the hip up, they were two ladies, two heads, 4 arms, and just like 2 trunks. But from the hip down, they became one. So there's only 2 legs. Just from the waist, hip down, they were one person. Up from that, the organs up from that, and the body was 2. Now these 2 people, these Siamese twins, genetically you can't get much closer than that. Environmental effects would have been just about identical, because they were always together. They were stuck together, so they were always together. So genetic environmental influence is very similar, yet their personalities were very, very different. One of them was very emotional and introvert. The other one was more intellectual and extrovert. Very different personalities. Now, that's very difficult to explain if you just take genetic and the environmental influences. Why should they be so different? Then there's this case of prodigies. Well, there are some children at the age of 4 are brilliant. Some of them can write symphonies, play the piano, do extremely complicated mathematics. Some of these children, so they can even write histories at the age of 5 or something. Now, how is it that this person can do that? A child of 4 or 5 being able to do mathematics when the parents probably don't know anything about mathematics. Why do they have such aptitude, so extraordinarily developed aptitude, as many of these prodigies do? If you want to take hereditary or genetic and environmental effect, it's very difficult to explain that. I don't think there is a way of explaining it. But in Buddhism we add one extra thing, and that is the karmic inheritance. That each person is not, the birth is not the beginning. The being that is born, for birth to take place, there's the genetic constituents made up from the egg and the sperm, and there is then also the being seeking for birth, consciousness. And it's very important to understand that in Buddhism, consciousness does not come from matter. You cannot just get matter and put it together and then you get consciousness. Consciousness comes from consciousness. Mind comes from mind. Matter doesn't have mind. The mind comes into matter. So that at birth, for birth to take place, what we call conception is actually requires as well the mind or the consciousness to arise there. And that consciousness comes from a being that's died, say, or it's the cause, it's the results from a previous consciousness. And it brings its karmic inheritance with it. It's from past experiences, past tendencies. It's all imprinted in each moment of consciousness. That's why then each human being that's born is not only the genetic and the environment, it's also got its karmic inheritance from past lives. So your children are born with you, that's true, but you don't know where they've come from. Quite frightening, isn't it? You don't know where your child has come from because of karmic inheritance. I mean, there must be an affinity because to be born in that situation requires an affinity. Karmic affinity, but still they're an individual human being. They're never going to be what you think or what you want, or they're not going to be exactly like you. They've got their own past, their own tendencies, their own accumulation. So the death is what we call the beginning. The end is much, you can view the end in a similar way. Contemplate now this mind that is able to animate this body and make it walk around, that mind, that desire to be, to experience, that can lift this body, make it walk, make it do all these things. That desire to be and experience is so powerful, so strong. And then the time of death, the body is defunct. The body cannot sustain life. The body cannot be the vehicle for experiencing anymore. Do you think that the mind will just disappear, come to an end? It's highly unlikely. That desire to be and experience is very powerful. Very powerful. And we know certainly that with the laws of science that you cannot take something and make it into nothing. And nobody can take something and make it into nothing. And materially you can't do it. Energy you can't. You can change energy, but you can't just take energy and make it into nothing. Energy or matter, you just can't. It's a transformation, but you can't just take it and make it into nothing. So there's mental energy to wanting to be and experience. The body cannot support, cannot be the basis for experience anymore. But that desire to be and experience is a powerful force. The moment of death, it just conditions the next consciousness, causes the next consciousness to arise in a new environment, in a new body. Now, this is something that we cannot, most of us can't, I can't remember my past lives, so you can rest assured, you don't have to ask me now. I don't think any of us can, really. So this teaching is nothing that we can verify directly now. But even intellectually, if we really contemplate it, we see that it's actually a very logical explanation, certainly much better than anything else that's being offered. And then there are people who can actually remember past lives. The Buddha could remember his past lives. Now, if you can't remember, just be very alert and attentive next time round. The next time round you may believe. I had a disciple in Perth, and he's like everyone else. We're all interested in these things, and what happens at death, and what is it really like? And so he had a friend who was very, very sick, and this lady was sort of diagnosed as being terminal. She was going to die in a few weeks. So that, of course, he was a close friend and he was wanting to help her, and especially because she had a daughter. And he sort of said, well, I'll take your daughter and we'll take her into our family and look after her, and she'll be looked after, we'll adopt her. I know, because that reassured the sick person. But then my disciple said, I only ask for one thing though, when you die, or when you're approaching death, when you die, I'm going to come here and I'm going to sit meditation. Now when you die, I want you to come and tell me what happened. But for God's sake, don't frighten me. And I was really he wasn't looking, he was sad that his friend was dying, but he was, in a way it was thought, there's no way to find out once and for all. But unfortunately the lady didn't die, she recovered, so he didn't find out as yet. So this still remains a mystery. But there are many people who remember their past lives. It's by far the most logical explanation. Anything else does seem far less, when you really start, I've only gone into it in very brief. When you go into it and question from different angles and reason it, the other explanations seem far less logical or reasonable or acceptable or sound.